Ryan Carter and Emily Dawson seemed like the perfect couple, young in love and inseparable. But beneath the surface of their picture-perfect relationship lurked jealousy, obsession, and a darkness no one saw coming. What started as a night of innocent fun at a college party would spiral into a shocking crime that left one of them dead and the other behind bars for life. Ryan Carter and Emily Dawson were the kind of couple everyone admired. They had been together since high school, their love surviving the transition to college. Ryan was a promising athlete, always striving for success, while Emily was known for her kindness and charm. They seemed inseparable, a perfect match in the eyes of their classmates and social media followers. Their relationship was filled with late-night calls, weekend getaways, and endless promises of a future together. To outsiders, they were the definition of young love. Emily would wait for Ryan after his practice sessions, cheering him on from the sidelines, always ready with a bottle of water and words of encouragement. Ryan, in return, was fiercely protective of her, never missing a chance to remind everyone that Emily was his. While some saw this as romantic devotion, others noticed something darker beneath the surface, an obsessive need to control. Ryan was not just protective, he was possessive. His jealousy often got the best of him, even in the most harmless situations. If Emily laughed too much at another guy's joke, Ryan would pull her aside, demanding to know if she was interested in someone else. If she didn't answer his texts fast enough, he would bombard her phone with messages, questioning her whereabouts. At first, Emily found his concern endearing, believing it was just a sign of deep love. She assured him that he had nothing to worry about, that he was the only one she wanted. But Ryan's insecurities only grew worse over time. When they started college, everything changed. Unlike their small high school where their relationship was at the center of attention, college was different. The campus was filled with new faces, new experiences, and new temptations. Emily, always friendly and outgoing, thrived in this new environment. She made new friends, joined social clubs, and began attending parties. Ryan, on the other hand, struggled to adjust. He didn't trust the new people in Emily's life. He didn't like how often she went out or how late she stayed. He didn't like that she had male friends who weren't him. Their arguments became frequent, but Emily refused to let Ryan's paranoia dictate her life. She wanted to enjoy college, to make the most of the experience, but she didn't want to lose him either. She tried to balance both, reassuring him that nothing would change between them. Still, Ryan's fears consumed him. One night, Emily told him she was going to a party with her friends. He didn't want her to go, but she refused to stay behind just to ease his mind. She promised she would be careful, that she would text him throughout the night. Ryan knew he couldn't stop her, but something inside him snapped. As she walked away laughing with her friends, he couldn't shake the feeling that this night would change everything. And he was right. It was supposed to be a fun night, just another college party like so many before. Emily had been hesitant at first, knowing how Ryan felt about her going out, but her friends convinced her. They told her she deserved to have fun, to enjoy her college experience without feeling guilty. She agreed, promising herself she wouldn't drink too much and would keep Ryan updated throughout the night. The fraternity house was packed by the time they arrived. Music blared from the speakers, shaking the floors with heavy bass. Students filled every corner, some dancing wildly, others gathered in small groups, chatting and laughing over drinks. The air was thick with the smell of alcohol, sweat, and cigarette smoke. Emily felt a rush of excitement. She hadn't gone out much since starting college, and for the first time in a while, she felt free. She stuck close to her friends at first, sipping her drink slowly and checking her phone every few minutes. Ryan had already texted her twice, asking who she was with, what she was doing. She replied quickly, assuring him she was fine. But as the night went on and the drinks kept coming, she found herself caring less about her phone and more about the moment. At some point, someone handed her another drink, stronger than the last. The room started spinning slightly, but she laughed it off. She was having fun, and she didn't want to think about Ryan's jealousy or his warnings about parties. For once, she just wanted to enjoy herself. She didn't notice the way some of the guys at the party were watching her. She didn't see the way they whispered to each other, their eyes lingering on her as she swayed to the music. She was too caught up in the moment, too intoxicated to realize the shift in atmosphere around her. At one point, she felt a wave of dizziness hit her. Her head was heavy, her limbs unsteady. She told her friends she needed to use the bathroom, pushing through the crowd toward the hallway. The house was massive, with multiple rooms branching off from the main living space. She finally found a small bathroom near the back and stumbled inside, locking the door behind her. As she splashed cold water on her face, she heard voices outside the door. Male voices, laughing and whispering. She thought nothing of it at first, assuming it was just more partygoers waiting for the bathroom. But then the handle jiggled. Her heart skipped a beat. Before she could react, the lock clicked open. She barely had time to process what was happening before the door was pushed open, and they were inside. A group of them. Faces she recognized from campus, guys she had seen in passing but never really spoken to. Her stomach twisted with fear as they closed the door behind them, drowning out the sound of the music. The night had taken a turn she could have never expected, and there was no way out. Ryan's phone buzzed just before sunrise. He had barely slept, his mind restless as he waited for Emily's usual goodnight message. When he saw her name on the screen, a surge of relief washed over him, until he read the message. Her words were jumbled, barely coherent, but the distress was unmistakable. Something terrible had happened. She told him she needed him, begged him to come over. Ryan sat up in bed, his heart pounding. His hands shook as he read the message again, trying to make sense of it. She told him she had been hurt, that something had happened in the bathroom, that she didn't know what to do. His body went cold. His mind raced through a dozen emotions, fear, confusion, anger, but one feeling overpowered all the rest, betrayal. He threw on his clothes, grabbed his keys, and drove straight to her dorm. The streets were empty, the city still asleep, but his thoughts roared like a storm in his head. What had she done? How had she let this happen? He imagined her at the party, drinking, laughing, surrounded by guys he didn't trust. Had she even tried to stop it? Had she even wanted to? By the time he reached her building, his hands were clenched into fists. He banged on her door, and when she opened it, he barely recognized her. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her face pale, her hands trembling. She looked broken. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing. She told him everything, at least what little she could remember. She told him how she had tried to fight, how she had felt trapped, how she had barely made out of the bathroom. She told him she felt disgusting, ashamed, afraid. She told him she needed him. But Ryan didn't hear her pain. He didn't see the girl he had promised to love and protect. He only saw the girl who had betrayed him. His arms remained stiff at his sides. His jaw tightened as his mind twisted the story into something darker. Had she really fought? Had she really tried to stop them, or had she let them? He thought about how she had ignored his messages, how she had been so eager to go to that party, how she had laughed when he told her not to trust those guys. His vision blurred with rage. His love for her, once unshakable, turned into something venomous. She noticed the shift in him. She pulled back, searching his face for comfort, for reassurance, but found none. Ryan looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see the girl he loved. He saw a girl who had humiliated him, a girl who had ruined everything. She had betrayed him, and in his mind, there was only one way to make it right. Ryan spent the entire day with Emily, but his mind was elsewhere. She sat curled up on the couch, clutching a blanket around her shoulders, her body trembling even though the room was warm. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her voice weak every time she spoke. She barely touched the food he brought her, barely responded when he tried to ask her questions. But Ryan wasn't asking out of concern. He wasn't looking for ways to comfort her. He wanted details. He needed to know exactly what had happened. Every vague answer she gave only fueled his anger. She couldn't remember how many there were. She didn't know their names. She didn't know how it had happened so quickly. Her uncertainty enraged him. He wanted her to say it had been a mistake, that she had let it happen, that she had betrayed him the way he was convinced she had. But all she did was cry, and every tear she shed felt like a mockery to him. By evening, Ryan had made up his mind. He told her they should go for a drive, get out of the stuffy dorm, clear their heads. Emily hesitated at first, but Ryan was calm, gentle even. He stroked her hair, whispered that he just wanted to take her somewhere quiet, somewhere safe where they could talk without distractions. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that after everything, he was still the one person she could trust. So she nodded, wiped her eyes, and followed him outside. The drive was quiet. Emily stared out the window, watching the streetlights blur together as they left campus behind. The city gave way to open roads, the darkness stretching around them like an endless void. Ryan's grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white. He never spoke, never glanced at her. A sense of unease crept over her. She shifted uncomfortably, the silence suffocating. She finally worked up the courage to ask where they were going. Ryan didn't answer. He kept driving until they reached a wooded area on the outskirts of town. The road was empty, the trees towering over them like silent witnesses. He pulled over, turned off the engine, and sat in the darkness. Emily's heart pounded. Something about the way he was sitting, the way his fingers twitched against the wheel, made her stomach churn. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Then, without warning, he lunged. His hands wrapped around her throat, his grip tightening as she gasped for air. Her eyes widened in shock, her hands clawing at his arms, trying to break free. But Ryan was stronger. Fueled by rage, by jealousy, by the twisted belief that this was the only way to erase the humiliation she had brought upon him. She struggled, her body thrashing against the seat, her legs kicking desperately. But her strength was already drained, her body too weak from the night before. The last thing she saw was his face, cold, emotionless, before everything faded to black. Ryan sat in his car, his hands still trembling. His breathing was ragged, his heart hammering in his chest. The silence around him was deafening, broken only by the faint rustling of the trees. Emily's body lay slumped in the passenger seat, her once bright eyes now lifeless. Her lips slightly parted, would never speak again. For the first time since he had read her message that morning, Ryan felt calm. The anger that had consumed him, the betrayal that had burned through his veins, had finally settled. It was done. No one would ever look at Emily the way they had at that party. No one would ever take her from him again. But as the adrenaline faded, reality set in. His hands were still around her neck, his fingers stiff from the force he had used. He let go, staring at the bruises already forming on her pale skin. He had thought this would bring him peace, but instead, a new feeling crept in, panic. What had he done? His mind raced. He wiped his hands on his jeans as if that would erase the evidence. He looked around, expecting headlights to appear in the distance, expecting someone to come knocking on his window, demanding answers. But there was no one. Just him and the girl he had sworn to love forever. He had to think. He had to be smart. He couldn't leave her here, not like this. He unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the passenger door, and hesitated. He had never touched death before. His fingers brushed against her arm, and he recoiled at how cold she already felt. But he forced himself to move. He dragged her out of the car, the weight of her body heavier than he had imagined. The forest was dark, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. He walked deeper in, his footsteps crunching against the fallen leaves. He didn't know how far he needed to go, just far enough. When he finally stopped, he laid her down gently, as if that could undo what he had done. He stared at her one last time before turning back to his car, leaving her in the silence of the trees. By the time he got home, his phone was flooded with messages. Emily's friends were looking for her. They had expected her to check in, to at least respond to their calls. Panic was already setting in among them. He knew he had to act normal. He had to pretend he didn't know anything. But it didn't take long for the truth to unravel. Security cameras had caught them leaving the dorm together. Witnesses had seen them drive off. When Emily's body was found days later, all eyes turned to Ryan. The evidence was undeniable. At trial, he tried to defend himself, twisting the story to paint Emily as the one who had ruined their love. But the jury saw through the lies. He was sentenced to life in prison, his future stolen, just as he had stolen her in the end. Emily got justice, but it had come far too late.